Welcome in to another episode of my Dynasty Fantasy Football YouTube. Today I'm looking at some Dynasty buys. As always, make sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't. Let's go. So my first player, Xavier Worthy, and I think this is a narrative thing. We're starting to shift away from Worthy. We're getting into best ball. I mean, that's been going on. Redraft season as well. And we're seeing that in redraft, Rashee Rice is ranked very high ahead of Xavier Worthy. But that doesn't mean that Worthy's bad or that Worthy's not valuable in Dynasty. So let's jump into why. Last year, in 17 games, 59 catches, 638 yards, 6 touchdowns, 98 targets, 3.5 catches, and 37.5 yards a game, and 20 carries, 104 yards, and 3 touchdowns. So Worthy was solid. He had a good rookie year. Considering his draft capital was late first, this was a good rookie year. Not every rookie is going to be Brian Thomas Jr. Xavier Worthy was a success, not a failure. I do think his actual numbers overall are less good than what people remember because the 9 touchdowns were pretty high. The target volume was okay. The catches were okay. The yards actually were nothing special on the catches. And because of those reasons, he averaged just 11 PPR points a game, 43rd among wide receivers. Again, nothing special. I do think it's a bit misleading because it counts week 18 where he didn't even play. He played like 2 snaps or whatever. And that game counts, but it didn't matter for fantasy. You wouldn't have started him anyway if he were playing. So I do think that he was a little bit better than this signifies. Now, there were a couple other reasons why I think Xavier Worthy was better. If we take a closer look, he was far stronger down the stretch, which is important because for a rookie, I care more about what happened in the second half of the season. It tends to be more predictive of the future than the first half for a rookie only. Now, he averaged 6.5 catches and 57.8 yards a game in the final 4 weeks of the season. Those are the games he played a full snap share. He also had 55 of his 104 total rushing yards during that period of time. He would have paced for 111 catches, but only 982 yards over a 17-game season. It was weird. He was getting very short usage. And during the playoffs, he was also good. He averaged 6.3 catches and 95.7 yards a game in the playoffs. Of course, we all remember the insane output in garbage time in the Super Bowl. But he totaled 11 catches, 130 yards, and a touchdown in the 2 previous games. It's not like he was irrelevant in the other 2 playoff games. He was relevant there as well. Now, Worthy is 22 years old. He has first-round draft capital. He was drafted to be a great player. He's really young. He is a valuable dynasty asset. Not every player on your dynasty team has to be a top 5 dynasty wide receiver. You cannot only have those. You have to have other players. And he is valuable. And he's not being treated like that sometimes. So, to me, Xavier Worthy is a slightly better version of Jordan Addison. Why? Because I like Rashee Rice, but he's not Justin Jefferson. And we have Patrick Mahomes instead of JJ McCarthy. So I do think there's more upside with Xavier Worthy. And that's why I'm interested in buying him. Now, this first trade, speaking of Jordan Addison, you can get Xavier Worthy plus these seconds for Jordan Addison. I would do that in a heartbeat. That is an easy trade to do. You get extra for a player I like more. No brainer. The second one, you get Xavier Worthy for RJ Harvey. Xavier Worthy is almost 2 years younger than RJ Harvey. He's a wide receiver versus a running back. I mean, this is a no-brainer. This is easy. And then the last one, Xavier Worthy for Devontae Adams and Jordan Mason. This is a rebuilder trade, trading away assets they don't want to get a young asset. But Xavier Worthy's a good asset. So I like this trade to get off those older assets to go to Xavier Worthy. And there were many other trades. These were just a few of them. Now, my next player, Justin Herbert. Now, I like Justin Herbert, both as a real life and as a fantasy quarterback. Again, I do think Herbert is more of a strategy buy than anything else because I tend to love the quarterbacks in this value range in Dynasty Superflex leagues. I like building around quarterbacks. Herbert is one of many quarterbacks in that range that I consider to be a buy. It's more about how quarterbacks are valued rather than how he's valued versus other quarterbacks. But let's jump into why I see it this way. So, in 17 games, he had 65.9% completion percentage. That's really good. 23 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. Good. 7.7 yards per attempt. Very strong. 227.6 passing yards a game. That could have been better. Low volume, 69 carries, 36 yards, and 2 touchdowns. So a little bit more running than in the past. He played very well from a real life perspective, stayed healthy all year, didn't make a lot of mistakes. He averaged 16.8 fantasy points a game, 13th among quarterbacks. I think that's better than people remember, especially given his flop in the playoffs, which we'll talk about a little bit more now. So, again, that playoff game was a problem for Justin Herbert, and I think it poisoned people's opinions of him, even though his season was great. He was a disaster in the Chargers playoff loss to the Texans. There were 4 interceptions. There was all sorts of other problems. It was a bad game. He had a bad game. But, Justin Herbert is not Sam Darnold. We have a long history of Justin Herbert being a very good real-life quarterback and at times a high-end fantasy option. The Chargers went 11-6 before that. He'd been on a hot streak before the game. And let's look at that. So last year, you have to look at the Chargers season in 2 phases, the beginning and the end. In the first 4 weeks, Herbert averaged 144 passing yards a game. But after the week 5 bye, he averaged 253.2 passing yards a game. What changed after the week 5 bye? The involvement of Ladd McConkey in the offense. They involved Ladd McConkey fully in the offense. They went away from the run-heavy approach. And I think what we saw after the week 5 bye, this was a new coaching staff under Greg Roman and head coach Jim Harbaugh. I think what we saw after the week 5 bye is a lot more representative of what we're going to see in 2025 than what we saw the first 4 weeks. Justin Herbert's not averaging 144 passing yards a game. That is not happening. So I think we also see that last year they were short on weapons. They had Ladd McConkey, but he was a rookie. He took a little bit to develop. They had QJ, who was meh. But now they added Trey Harris. They brought back Mike Williams, and they still have QJ, who was quietly better in 2024 than 2023. But they basically replaced Josh Palmer, who was meh, with Trey Harris and Mike Williams to give them more depth, which I like. I also like Oronde Gadsden as a sleeper, who I think could help them as well. So they added weapons. And, of course, they added running backs. And I do think Omarion Hampton is great in the passing game, could provide value there. Now, to buy Justin Herbert. A lot of people think Justin Herbert's older than he is. He's only 27, very young for a quarterback. He's got 10 years left. I mean, he's an excellent real-life quarterback, franchise quarterback, who's not treated that way in Dynasty. I mean, really, what's the difference between Justin Herbert and Patrick Mahomes? Patrick Mahomes has more perceived value. He wasn't better last year, and he's 3 years older. There's really no difference between those two players from a fantasy perspective, from a dynasty perspective, other than that Herbert's younger. So you can buy Justin Herbert, Rico Dowdle, 26 third for Keon Coleman, 27 first, 26 second. These are all 12-team Superflex leagues. And I would do that. I mean, this is a very, very cheap price for a quarterback like Justin Herbert. Then there's this trade, which is a swap of quarterbacks. Herbert and a 26 third for Stroud and a 26 fourth. I would prefer Herbert over Stroud. I'm sure that Herbert is a really good real-life quarterback. I think that CJ Stroud is a really good real-life quarterback. So I'm not sure between those two. So I would rather have the guy I'm sure about. I'm not quibbling. I don't know. One of those is a word. I'm not worrying too much about the age here. We're talking about quarterbacks that have 10 years left. So I would rather have Herbert straight up. And then speaking of Omarion Hampton, I mean, I like Omarion Hampton, but not this much. Justin Herbert in a Superflex league is worth far more than Omarion Hampton. So I would easily take Justin Herbert there. Now, if you like my YouTube content, you should sign up for the Patreon. I'm offering a 50% discount off your first month at all tiers using the code TylerYT50. Type that code in at checkout. Sign up in the top right corner, patreon.com/fantasyadvice, and you'll get this discount. You can get my rankings, all of them. And redraft rankings are coming out this week. Access to the Discord, write-ups, Patreon-only videos, direct message fantasy advice, and the ability to ask in advance questions for YouTube videos, which you see at the end of this video. Tiers begin at just $5 a month, $250 with the discount. Now, I would love to see people join. We're going to enter redraft season. I'm not doing redraft content anywhere else other than the Patreon. That will be a Patreon exclusive. I'll be doing start sit content on the Patreon. By and large, It certainly won't happen on here. Not going to happen much on X. And definitely not happening in the YouTube comments. Start-sit content will occur on the Patreon. So I will be doing everything in season waivers as well, mostly, if not all, on the Patreon. So if you want to know more about the Patreon, you can check out my why you should join the Patreon videos on the channel. But I would love to see people join. At the end of the day, the Patreon supports the YouTube. The Patreon keeps the YouTube going. The YouTube will not continue to exist without the Patreon. It is dependent on the Patreon success to exist. So, it is what it is. I would appreciate people signing up. There's a lot of activity in there every single day. And I have a lot of fun in there. So I'm hoping that you sign up and you have a lot of fun too. But last thing, TylerYT50, patreon.com/fantasy advice. Type that code in. You'll get 50% off your first month. With that said, I'll move into my final Dynasty buy. So my final Dynasty buy is Darnell Mooney. And I talked about Mooney a little bit on my June 16th 5 takeaways video as part of my conversation about Drake London. And I mentioned that as part of that, I might do a whole buy video on Darnell Mooney. So here we are talking about Mooney. In 16 games, 64 catches, 992 yards, 5 touchdowns, 106 targets, 4 catches, and 62.0 yards a game. Basically, Mooney returned to his form from 2021, where he had his breakout year. He sat out the final game of the year with an injury, struggled a bit during Cousins' waning performances, but he consistently outproduced Pitts, and it was Mooney who was the secondary breakout alongside the big breakout of Drake London. This is what a lot of people were saying pre-2024. Remember, the narrative was Drake London is going to smash in year 3. I said that. A lot of people said that. That was correct. But the takeaway number 2 was who's going to be the secondary beneficiary? Is it going to be Darnell Mooney or Kyle Pitts? At cost, I was betting on Darnell Mooney, and I was correct. Not Kyle Pitts, who I hate. And Mooney was pretty good. 12.1 PPR points a game, 37th among wide receivers. He was good. He was good for real life, good for fantasy, and he was a streaming type of, mid wide receiver 3 who was startable in deep Dynasty leagues. In a 12-team start 10, Mooney was absolutely a startable player for Dynasty. Now, why do I have Darnell Mooney as a Dynasty buy? Well, first, the lack of outside additions. The Falcons failed to add a single relevant outside addition to their entire offensive skill player set, right? I mean, they brought everyone back. They did not draft anyone. They did not sign anyone. We still have Michael Penix now as the starter. Kirk Cousins is the backup. The same 2 running backs, the same 3 starting wide receivers, and Kyle Pitts as tight end. Nothing has changed. So the coaching staff has not changed. So I do not see why the pecking order would change. I am telling you that Drake London is going to be elite and Darnell Mooney is going to be a second option on this offense. That's what's going to happen as a receiver. Obviously, Bijan Robinson is the second option, but he's a running back. Now, Michael Penix could bring the offense to new heights, though. So that's something I could see. It's a risk, but I don't think that Michael Penix can be worse than what Kirk Cousins was after he broke down. I think we can all agree on that. He's an upgrade over the broken version of Kirk Cousins. That is clear. And Mooney signed a 3-year, $39 million contract last year, turns 28 years old in October. So Mooney is a different type of buy. We're not buying Mooney because he's going to increase in value. He had a great season last year, and he's still not that valuable. So we're buying Mooney for the rest of Darnell Mooney's career. I don't expect that we're going to be able to sell Darnell Mooney. This is a contender's buy. We want the production. Now, speaking of the production, he's cheap compared to his possible production. Now, you could have bought it for cheaper earlier in the offseason, but let's say you didn't. You still have an opportunity. And there are some cheap deals here. The first, Darnell Mooney and a 26 first for Jalen Waddle. So why did I do this one? Because this deal is obviously not about Darnell Mooney. And that's true. It's 26 first for Jalen Waddle. This is a 12-team super flex. So on surface, I prefer the 26 first. But this is an extra throw-in you're getting. You're replacing Waddle's production and getting future draft capital. Why not be greedy, right? The other 2 trades are more lopsided. So Darnell Mooney for Dyami Brown in the 26th fourth. I mean, really? Dyami Brown has not had 200 yards or whatever. Very little production at all. And a 26th fourth is not worth anything. So this is silly. And then this last one I thought was interesting. Darnell Mooney for Aaron Jones. I think if on the balance, I'd rather have the rest of Darnell Mooney's career, whatever it is, over the rest of Aaron Jones's career, whatever that is. If I had to choose. I think I'd rather have, whatever production you're getting from Darnell Mooney. I'm worried about Aaron Jones. I'm worried that Jordan Mason is going to be the starter by halfway through the season. I'm worried that Aaron Jones is going to be one of those running backs who's worthless in a year's time. I'd rather just take what I'm getting from Darnell Mooney. And, in dynasty leagues are usually a little bit deeper. Darnell Mooney is a starting player rather than deal with Aaron Jones, who I just have no interest in. So those are some ways to buy Darnell Mooney. So we'll do some Patreon questions and we'll close out the show. So the first, who are some veterans that you're markedly different from the rest of the industry on and why? Well, those would be my buy and my sell videos. We did ones that I'm buying. Ones that I'm selling, it tends to be the older guys, right? It tends to be the older guys. It tends to be the assets I think are in decline. Aaron Jones, Mike Evans. It's almost always the older guys that I'm lower on. In terms of someone that I'm lower on that has nothing to do with age, I don't know. Most of the ones I'm lower on are age-based. Breece Hall, I'm a little bit low on, and he's not old. I'm a little nervous about Breece Hall. But yeah, it tends to be the older guys. Chase Brown, I think I'm a little lower on. It tends to be the older guys or running backs almost always. But yeah, watch my sell videos. My sell videos will tell you all the players. And also on the Patreon, you can just compare and do this. If you're a patron, do this. Compare my rankings to someone else's. That'll tell you who I'm lower on. So that's a great way that you can do it. What position do you find yourself reaching back for more when doing startup drafts? I was a little confused by this question. Is this what I find myself reaching for or drafting more of? In a Superflex, I find myself building around quarterback. And in Superflex and 1 QB around wide receiver, almost always. In tight end, if it's a tight end premium, I might look at an early tight end. If it's not, I tend to fade tight end. I feel like you can win in a non-tight end premium league without a really good tight end. And then running back, that's dependent on how the running backs are going. Typically, I find myself mostly fading running back in Dynasty. But yeah, it depends on the exact format. But in Superflex, I'm always building around quarterback. I'm never going to fade quarterback in a Superflex league, pretty much ever. And then this one, how do you approach drafting a Dynasty best ball team? What are some key differences in how you draft your starter between best ball contests, like Underdog versus Dynasty best ball? Yeah, so Dynasty best ball, I think that the one thing that really changes, the big thing, is that those roster clogger wide receivers at the bottom of the roster are valuable again because you don't have to choose when to start them. So in a lineup league, you know when to start a backup running back. It's when the starter's hurt, right? That's easy to do that. You don't know when to start the wide receiver 3 on a team. You don't know that. It's harder. Even if wide receivers in front get hurt, you don't know that the backup is going to pick up in the same way. It doesn't work that way for wide receivers. But in a best ball league, you get those points no matter what. So you can focus on, like, who's a good example? Someone like Tutu Atwell. Maybe that's not even, or Dontavian Wicks. Players like that. In a best ball league, those are still players that have some value. Whereas in a lineup league, I just am not that interested in those players. So it's kind of similar to best ball in that way. But overall, it's not that different. My approach doesn't change that much. In lineup leagues, so this is the opposite. How should the end of the bench be constructed after relevant players? Just most value, or should I skew toward a certain position? There does come a point at which I no longer really want wide receivers in a lineup league. There does come a point at which I really don't want to draft those guys. I would try to lean toward running backs. And chasing deeper tight ends, unless there's a really heavy tight end premium, is usually, if there's no tight end premium at all, I'm not chasing deeper tight ends. That's something I tend not to do at all. So, yeah, in general, it's value, but I tend to be more biased towards running backs at the bottom of the roster because that's where I'd rather take a chance on a running back. There's much more opportunity to gain value for a bottom of the roster running back than there is for a bottom of the roster wide receiver. Do you find that striving to always win the deal in a singular snapshot of time ultimately results in missing out on opportunities to improve your team? Asking because winning the deal mantra is as popular as ever, but over 1 to 2 years that some moves take time to show a clear winner of the deal. This is basically asking if I had a crystal ball and knew who was going to win the deal in the future, would that help me? The answer is, of course. Of course it would. If I could see the future, I mean, I love you guys, but I wouldn't be here. I'd be going and betting all of my money on futures at sportsbooks. And, I wouldn't be here doing these videos. So that's another thing, is anyone saying that they know for sure what's going to happen would not be here doing fantasy football content. They just wouldn't. They'd be betting on it with all of their money if they knew. So to a degree, I think the focus on winning the deal can kind of limit your thinking. But at the end of the day, I want to build around value. That hasn't changed. That's always been my approach. It's not a new approach in the last 1 to 2 years. Maybe for some people, they're just catching up. But no, it's always been my approach ever since I've done content. And yes, I do want to get more value. The main way I make deals is by finding people who are higher on consensus on one of my players than I am and selling them at a higher price than I value them at. That's the main way I make deals. That's not a new strategy. That's not an exciting or novel approach, but it's been the approach I've played Dynasty with for years, and it's still successful. So not really, I think, is my answer. I don't really find that I'm missing out on opportunities. No, I really don't. You just have to be creative in how you win the deal. Don't limit yourself to one way of winning. So I think that would be kind of my clarification on that. Okay. If you like the video, make sure to support the channel by subscribing. And don't forget to hit that notifications bell so you can be notified about all my exciting content as it drops. Really does help. Although I do have a similar recording schedule. Monday, Wednesday, Friday is what we're going to stick to pretty much forever. If you want my best fantasy football advice, is available on the Patreon. Dynasty and other fantasy football content year-round. 50% discount at all tiers using code TylerYT50. Every sign-up helps support my independent content, namely this YouTube channel, but also the stuff I do on Twitter. But once again, thanks for watching, and I'll see you all later.